Welcome, everyone. Here is today's story. I showed up to my father's company with a fake resume, a rented basement apartment in East Vancouver, and exactly $47 in my checking account. 3 weeks later, a man I had never seen before walked through the front doors, announced he was the founder's daughter, and started signing my termination papers. If she was the heir, then what the hell was I? The rain in Vancouver never really stops in November. It just takes short breaks to catch its breath before dumping on you again. I was standing under the awning of a pho restaurant on Commercial Drive, sharing a bowl of soup with my coworker Jolene. Jo was the kind of person who would literally give you the jacket off her back and then apologize for it being wrinkled. She was a single mom raising two little boys in a cramped apartment in Surrey, commuting an hour and a half each way on the SkyTrain to get to our office downtown. She pushed the bowl toward me. "Audrey, eat. You look pale. Did you skip breakfast again?" I had. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I was so deep into this undercover thing that I had started actually living the part. My real name was Audrey Sinclair. My father, Hugh Sinclair, was the founder and CEO of Sinclair Development Group, one of the largest real estate firms in British Columbia. He owned half the new condo towers going up along False Creek. But here I was, just Audrey from the leasing department, wearing a parka I had grabbed from Value Village and boots with a cracked sole that let the rain seep in. I had begged my father to let me start at the bottom. No special treatment. No corner office. I wanted to understand how the company actually ran, to meet the people who kept it alive day after day. People like Jo. "You hear the news?" Jo said between bites, steam curling around her face. "Apparently some big shot is coming in next week. Someone connected to the Sinclair family. The girls in admin are losing their minds." I raised an eyebrow. "Connected how?" "Rumor is it's the CEO's daughter, coming to learn the business from the ground up, or lord it over us, probably the second one." I almost choked on a bean sprout. My father had mentioned something about a new regional manager, but he never said anything about anyone claiming to be his daughter. I was his daughter, his only child. I smiled and shrugged. "We'll see. Could be fine. Could be a nightmare. Either way, we just keep doing our jobs, right?" Jo gave me a look that said she did not share my optimism. Monday morning, the entire leasing office smelled like someone had doused it in anxiety and cheap air freshener. Everyone was sitting straighter than usual, checking their reflections in their monitors. Then the elevator doors opened, and in walked Bryce Whitfield. She was tall, probably 5'10" in her heels, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. She wore a white blazer, oversized designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, and carried a Birkin bag that probably cost more than Jo's annual rent. Behind her trailed Todd Kemper from facilities, already carrying her coffee and her dry cleaning like a personal valet. He had always been the type to attach himself to whoever held power. Bryce stopped in the center of the open plan office and removed her sunglasses with a dramatic flourish. "Good morning, I'm Bryce Whitfield. I'll be your new regional director, effective immediately. I report directly to Hugh Sinclair, who, as some of you may know, is my father." The room went dead quiet. I felt my pulse spike. "Father? My father?" I studied her face, searching for any resemblance to the man who had taught me to skate on Trout Lake and helped me with my grade 12 physics homework. There was none. "I believe in efficiency, discipline, and loyalty," Bryce continued, pacing slowly like a drill sergeant. "Those who meet my standards will be rewarded. Those who don't will be replaced. It's that simple. Now, back to work." She turned on her heel and disappeared into the corner office that used to belong to our old manager, who had conveniently been transferred to the Calgary branch the week before. Todd scurried after her, not before shooting a smug grin at the rest of us. Jo leaned over and whispered, "We're screwed." Within 3 days, Bryce turned the office into her personal kingdom. She made everyone stand when she entered the room. She banned personal phone calls during work hours, no exceptions. She had Todd patrol the floor with a clipboard. writing down anyone who took a washroom break longer than 5 minutes. The first real blow landed on Joe. It was a Wednesday morning. Joe's phone buzzed on her desk. She glanced at it and her face went white. She picked it up and whispered, "Hello? Yes, this is his mother. How high is the fever?" Bryce materialized behind her like a ghost. She snatched the phone from Joe's hand and ended the call. "What did I say about personal calls during work hours?" Joe's hands were shaking. "My son's daycare just called. He's sick. He might need to go to the hospital. Please, I just need 2 minutes." Bryce tossed the phone onto the desk like it was garbage. "Your son. Your problem. Handle it on your lunch break. And for the disruption, I'm docking your quarterly bonus. All of it." Joe's quarterly bonus was $1,500. That was her boy's Christmas. That was groceries for 2 months. That was everything. I watched my friend's face crumble, and every cell in my body screamed at me to say something, to tell this woman exactly who I was and exactly what she could do with her clipboard. But Joe caught my eye and shook her head slightly. She knew I had a temper. She didn't want me to get in trouble for her sake. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. That night, I sat in my basement apartment staring at the water stains on the ceiling, just like every other night. But this time, I picked up my phone and called my father on his private line. "Dad, who is Bryce Whitfield?" There was a pause. Then my father's calm, deep voice. "I was wondering when you'd call about that. I've been looking into it. She showed up at corporate 3 weeks ago with a DNA report and a birth certificate. She claims to be my biological daughter from a relationship before your mother. Is it real? I don't know yet. I've ordered an independent DNA test, but these things take time. In the meantime, the board thought it would be wise to give her a position while we sort things out. I didn't want to worry you." "She's terrorizing people, Dad. She docked my friend's bonus for answering a call about her sick child." Another pause. "Handle it your way, Audrey. I trust you. But be careful. If she is who she claims to be, this gets complicated." I hung up and lay back on my futon. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. The next morning, Bryce called an all-hands meeting. She stood at the front of the conference room, Todd lurking behind her with his clipboard, and announced a new policy. All Miss renewals would now require her personal sign-off, adding days to a process that usually took hours. Any tenant complaints would go through her directly, and anyone who failed to meet a newly inflated monthly target would face a formal performance review. It was absurd. These targets were 30% higher than anything corporate had ever set. People who had been with the company for a decade started updating their resumes that afternoon. I stayed late that night, going through files on my work computer. Something about Bryce's confidence bothered me. She wasn't just arrogant, she was specific. She knew things about the company's structure, about how departments connected, about which managers could be pressured and which couldn't. Someone on the inside had been feeding her information. I started digging. By the end of the week, I had found irregularities in 3 lease agreements that Bryce had personally signed off on. Properties that should have been rented at market rate were being leased to a numbered company at a massive discount. A numbered company whose registered address, when I looked it up on the BC Corporate Registry, led back to a condo in Yaletown owned by one Todd Kemper. The two of them were siphoning money. On Thursday, Bryce's attack became personal. She called me into her office and closed the door. I sat across from her. Up close, I could see that her confidence was a performance, carefully rehearsed but brittle around the edges. "Audrey, I've been reviewing your file," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Your performance is adequate, but your attitude is a problem. You have a habit of questioning authority. I have a habit of asking questions when things don't add up." Her eyes narrowed. "I've decided to reassign you. Starting Monday, you'll be handling parking lot maintenance requests. If you have a problem with that, there's the door." Parking lot maintenance. It was a humiliation assignment designed to make me quit. I smiled politely. "I'll do my best, Ms. Whitfield." As I stood to leave, she added, And tell your little friend Jolene that if her phone rings one more time, she's gone. I don't care if her kid is dying. That was the moment I decided I was done playing nice. I went back to my desk, pulled out my personal phone, and texted my father 2 words: call Navarro. Mr. Navarro was our family's attorney, a quiet, meticulous man who had worked for Sinclair Development since before I was born. If anyone could untangle Bryce's web, it was him. The next few days were agonizing. I kept my head down, processed parking complaints, and watched Bryce grow bolder. She started expensing personal shopping trips to the company card. She had fresh flowers delivered to her office every morning. She brought in a contractor to repaint her office walls, a specific shade of ivory that better reflected her personal brand. Todd, meanwhile, grew more insufferable by the hour. He strutted around the office telling anyone who would listen that he was going to be promoted to VP once Bryce took full control. People who used to eat lunch with Joe and me now crossed to the other side of the break room when we walked in. Fear does that. It makes cowards of decent people. Joe was barely hanging on. Her son Mateo had been diagnosed with pneumonia, and the antibiotics the walk-in clinic prescribed weren't covered by her basic benefits plan. She was stretching every dollar, cutting her own meals to feed her boys. One evening after work, I found her crying in the stairwell. I can't do this anymore, Audrey. I'm 2 months behind on rent. Mateo needs a specialist, but the wait list is 8 months. I'm thinking about quitting and moving back to Trois Rivières to live with my sister. I sat down beside her on the cold concrete step and put my arm around her. Don't quit. Not yet. I know things look terrible right now, but I promise you it's going to get better. Just give me a few more days. She looked at me with red, exhausted eyes. How? How is it going to get better? She's untouchable. She's the CEO's daughter. I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. The call came on a Friday. My father's voice was tense but certain. The DNA results are in. She's not my daughter, Audrey. Not even close. The original report she submitted was fabricated. Navarro traced it back to a lab in the States that's been shut down for fraud. And there's more. Bryce Whitfield's real name is Bryce Olson. She has a history of corporate infiltration schemes in Alberta and Saskatchewan. She targets family-owned companies, claims a blood relation, and embezzles as much as she can before anyone catches on. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for weeks. What do you want me to do? Whatever you think is right. I've already briefed the board. Navarro has all the evidence. But I think the employees deserve to hear it from someone they trust. They don't know who I am, Dad. Then maybe it's time they did. The following Monday, I walked into the office wearing the same Value Village parka and cracked boots. But I carried a slim leather folder under my arm, and I had asked Mr. Navarro and our head of HR, a woman named Petra Gognan, to meet me in the building's lobby at 9 o'clock sharp. At 9:15, Bryce swept into the office as usual, Todd trailing behind her with a latte. She settled into her chair and began barking orders. I stood up from my desk, walked to the center of the office, and said in a clear voice, "Bryce, I need to speak with you. In front of everyone." She laughed. "Excuse me? You're the parking lot girl. Sit down before I have security remove you. I don't think you want to do that." The elevator doors opened, and in walked Petra Gognan, Mr. Navarro, and 2 members of the corporate security team. Bryce's face flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. Fear. Petra stepped forward and addressed the room. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Petra Gognan, Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Sinclair Development Group. I'm here because a serious matter has been brought to our attention regarding this office's current leadership." Bryce shot to her feet. "What is this?" "I'm the regional director. I wasn't informed of any visit. I'll be calling my father about this." Navarro, calm as always, opened his briefcase and laid a stack of documents on the nearest desk. "Ms. Olson, your real name is Bryce Olson. You have no biological relation to Hugh Sinclair. The DNA report you submitted to our board was fabricated by a fraudulent laboratory. You are also the subject of ongoing RCMP investigations in both Edmonton and Regina for similar schemes. The office was so quiet I could hear the rain tapping on the windows. Bryce's mask cracked completely. Her eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. That's a lie. I'm Hugh Sinclair's daughter. I have documentation. I have rights. I stepped forward. No, you don't. Because I'm Hugh Sinclair's daughter. I pulled my company ID from the leather folder, the real one, with my full name and title, Audrey Sinclair, Vice President of Strategic Development, Sinclair Development Group. I've been working in this office for 3 months. I've watched you bully and exploit every person in this room. I've documented every fraudulent lease you signed, every dollar you funneled to your accomplice's numbered company, every policy you invented to intimidate people into silence. I looked at Todd. He had gone the color of old porridge. And Todd, the properties you've been skimming through that numbered company on West Georgia, we have every transaction, every signature, every deposit. Todd dropped the latte. It splattered across the floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. Bryce lunged toward the door, but the security team blocked her path. She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw her without the performance. She was just a person who had gotten so used to lying that she had forgotten there was any other way to live. You can't do this to me, she hissed. I can, and I am. Petra, please proceed. Petra nodded. Bryce Olson and Todd Kemper, your employment is terminated effective immediately for fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of corporate documents. The RCMP has been notified and will be in contact. Please surrender your access cards and any company property. Todd handed over his badge without a word, head hanging. Bryce refused. Security had to escort her out. She screamed the entire way down the hallway, threats and accusations echoing off the glass walls, until the elevator doors finally closed and swallowed the sound. The office sat in stunned silence. I looked around at the faces I had come to know over 3 months. The administrative assistant who always refilled the coffee machine, the leasing agent who kept a photo of his new baby on his desk, the receptionist who knew everyone's birthday, and Joe, my best friend in this place, who was staring at me with her mouth open, tears already forming. I took a breath. I know this is a lot to take in. I owe all of you an explanation. My name is Audrey Sinclair. I came here because I wanted to understand this company from the inside, not from a boardroom. I wanted to know who you are, what you deal with, what you need. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. But I promise you, from today, things are going to be different here. I turned to Petra. First order of business. Jolene Owile's quarterly bonus is to be restored immediately, with an additional amount for the emotional distress she's been subjected to. Second, I want a full review of every policy Bryce implemented. Anything that doesn't serve the employees gets scrapped. Third, I'd like to set up an emergency fund for employees dealing with medical expenses that fall outside our benefits plan. We'll start with $100,000. Joe let out a small sob. She wasn't the only one. After the meeting, people came up to me one by one. Some apologized for not standing up sooner. Some just shook my hand. A few couldn't look me in the eye, and I understood that too. I didn't hold it against them. Fear is a powerful thing, and not everyone has the luxury of being brave when their mortgage is on the line. I found Joe in the stairwell. Our stairwell. She was sitting on the same step where she had cried the week before, but this time she was laughing through her tears. You absolute lunatic, she said. You've been a secret billionaire this entire time? All those nights we split poutine because you said you were broke? I sat down beside her. The poutine was real. The broke part was mostly real. I was genuinely living on $47 that one week. She punched my arm. Hard. I cannot believe you. I've been lending you bus fare, and I'm going to pay you back, with interest. She wiped her eyes. Audrey, or whatever your name is, Are we still friends? Because this is a lot. We're still friends. That's the one thing that was never fake. I hesitated, then continued. Joe, I set up an appointment for Mateo with a pediatric respiratory specialist at BC Children's Hospital this Friday, and I've arranged for your benefits to be upgraded to the premium plan, retroactive to your start date. The antibiotics, the specialist visits, all of it will be covered. Joe stared at me. Then she grabbed me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That evening, I drove back to the Fru restaurant on Commercial Drive. The owner, Mrs. Lai, was wiping down tables when I walked in. Audrey, you're late today. The usual? The usual. But make it 2 bowls. And Mrs. Lai, I want to settle my tab. All of it. And I'd like to leave something extra for all the times you gave me free soup when you thought I wasn't looking. Mrs. Lai waved her hand dismissively. You don't owe me anything. You always said thank you. That's enough. I pressed an envelope into her hand anyway. She opened it later, after I had left. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note that said, for every bowl of soup that kept me going, thank you for your kindness. 2 weeks later, the dust had settled. The RCMP confirmed that Bryce Olson had pulled the same scheme at 2 other family-owned companies before targeting Sinclair Development. She was facing multiple charges. Todd had cooperated with investigators and would likely receive a lighter sentence, but his career was finished. My father called me into his office at the main headquarters in downtown Vancouver. It was the first time I had been there in months. The view from the top floor was stunning. The harbor, the mountains, Stanley Park in its autumn colors. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. You did well, Audrey. Better than I could have. I had good people around me. He turned to face me. I need to tell you something. The independent DNA test I ordered, it confirmed what Navarro found. Bryce has no genetic connection to me whatsoever. But during the investigation, something else came up. My stomach tightened. What? Bryce was recruited. Someone inside the company fed her information, coached her on our family history, and helped her fabricate the documents. That person was Raymond Chen, our former VP of Operations. I knew Raymond. He had been with the company for 15 years. He had always been polite to my face and had sent me birthday cards when I was a teenager. Why? Jealousy. Resentment. He believed he deserved a larger equity stake and felt I had passed him over for promotion. He thought if he could install a puppet as my heir and discredit you, he could eventually take control of the board. My father sat down heavily. He looked older than I remembered. I'm sorry, Audrey. I should have seen it sooner. You couldn't have known. That's what parents always say when they've let their children down. I went around the desk and hugged him. He smelled like coffee and cedar, the same way he had smelled my entire life. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. I formally took over as COO of Sinclair Development Group the following January. My first act was to promote Jolene Ouellette to regional manager of the Vancouver leasing office, the same office where she had once had her phone snatched from her hand for daring to check on her sick child. The day I pinned her new name badge on her blazer, she looked at it and then looked at me. You know I'm going to be terrible at this, right? You're going to be incredible. And if anyone gives you trouble, remind them that your best friend owns the building. She laughed. That laugh was worth everything. On a rainy Saturday afternoon in March, Joe and I took her boys, Mateo and little Hugo, to the Vancouver Aquarium. Mateo was healthy now, running ahead of us, pressing his face against the glass to watch the jellyfish. Hugo rode on my shoulders, pulling my hair and giggling. Joe walked beside me, holding 2 overpriced hot chocolates. I've been thinking, she said. What about? That whole time, when you were pretending to be broke and I was actually broke, you never once made me feel small. You never talked down to me. You split everything 50-50 even though you could have paid for everything 1,000 times over. That's because you weren't a charity case, Joe. You were my friend. I know. That's what I'm saying. That's the part that matters. We stood there watching the jellyfish drift, weightless and glowing, while the rain hammered the glass ceiling above us. I thought about the past few months. The cold stairwell, the stolen phone, the parking lot assignment. The moment I stood in front of that office and said my real name out loud for the first time in 3 months. I had gone into that company looking for the truth about how it operated. What I found instead was something I hadn't expected. A friendship that had nothing to do with my last name, a loyalty that couldn't be bought with stock options or corner offices. I had learned that the people who keep a company alive aren't the ones in the boardroom. They're the ones taking the SkyTrain from Surrey at 6 in the morning, stretching every dollar, showing up even when the world gives them every reason not to. And I had learned that the most dangerous person in any organization isn't the one who's openly cruel. It's the one who smiles at you while quietly rearranging the furniture to make sure you fall. Mateo turned from the jellyfish tank and ran back to us, his face lit up with wonder. Audrey, did you see that one? It was huge. I crouched down and met his eyes. I saw it, buddy. Pretty amazing, right? He nodded vigorously and grabbed my hand, dragging me back to the glass. Joe watched us and smiled, and in that smile was everything I had spent 3 months searching for. Trust, earned honestly, in a world that makes it so easy to fake.